The mouse of the day is Moon Miguel, and he's an otherworldly mouse, guys. He's currently living on the moon of Mouseldorf 86, so he lives in space right now, but unfortunately this moon is not made out of cheese. He was really hoping it would be, but nope. Before we get into today's video, don't forget to smash like, guys, and subscribe. Moon Miguel was a mouse with a dream bigger than anyone could understand. Since he was little, Moon Miguel had been obsessed with Mouseldorf 86 with its glowing moon. This was his obsession, a celestial target that filled his mind every single day and night. Miguel didn't want to just watch it from a distance, he wanted to stand on its surface. Miguel had always been obsessed with the stars. He devoured every scrap of information he could on rockets, stars, and space. When he was just barely old enough, he started to understand mechanics and he started building models of spacecraft from whatever he could scavenge around the village. Over the years, his tiny model rockets turned into larger, more serious projects, and eventually, he realized that he was close to his goal. He started designing a ship to take him to the moon of Mouseldorf 86, which he had started to call Luna. The project consumed him entirely. His friends, well-meaning as they were, thought he'd lost his mind. Miguel, they'd say, "You're a mouse. You belong here on this solid ground." But Miguel wouldn't be swayed. "I'm a mouse with a mission," he replied, nose twitching with determination. It took countless nights, piles of scrap metal, and enough cheese to power his dreams through every setback, but he finally did it. His ship was called the Cheese Chaser, a compact, sturdy vessel that might look humble, but held a powerful promise. It was patched together with bits of metal soda can pieces and wires that connected everything in a maze only he could navigate. He installed everything he'd need for the journey: small fuel tanks, a simple control panel, a tiny bed for resting, and of course a huge stash of cheese for sustenance. On the night of the launch, the entire village gathered to watch him take off, their eyes filled with a mix of awe and confusion. Miguel nodded, his eyes bright. "Yes, I am. I've been planning this for years. It's time I saw what's out there." With a deep breath, Miguel climbed into the cockpit of the Cheese Chaser, strapping himself in tightly and going through his pre-flight checklist. The villagers stepped back with their tails wrapped around each other as they braced for the unknown. He gave them one last nod, his paws hovering over the controls. He whispered to himself, "Here goes nothing," and pressed the launch button. The Cheese Chaser roared to life, shooting up into the night sky. The force of the acceleration pressed Miguel back into his seat, but he was too thrilled to be afraid. Through the small window, he watched as the ground grew smaller and smaller, his home fading into blurs of green and brown as he ascended into the vastness of space. Finally, he was on his way to the moon of Mouseldorf 86, Luna. The journey was long and eerily quiet. Miguel spent the days navigating and adjusting the ship's course, keeping a careful eye on his fuel levels and checking the maps just in case. He marveled at the stars around him, watching distant planets drift by and feeling a deep sense of awe at the endless space. Every once in a while, he'd spot a shooting star or a faint comet, each one a reminder of the vastness and beauty of the universe he was journeying through. But nothing filled him with quite as much awe as the sight of Mouseldorf 86 drawing closer. The planet loomed ahead of him, its swirling storm and colorful atmosphere unlike anything he'd ever seen before. And there, orbiting the planet like a silent guardian, was its moon, a small rocky sphere glowing with a mysterious silvery light. Miguel's heart raced as he prepared for the landing. He double-checked his coordinates, making sure he was aligned with the perfect spot he had chosen before. A flat, cratered area near the moon's equator is where he wanted to land. This was it. After years of planning, countless hours of work, and a lifetime of dreaming, he was about to set paw on a place that no mouse had ever been before. As the Cheese Chaser began its descent, Miguel felt his paws tightening on the controls. The moon's surface grew larger in the window as it came closer, its craters and ridges coming into focus. He adjusted the thrusters, slowing his speed as he carefully guided the ship to the ground. The landing was smooth, the ship settling onto the moon's dusty surface with a gentle thud. Miguel took a deep breath, unstrapping himself and grabbing his helmet. He checked his oxygen levels to make sure his suit was secure and opened the hatch. A rush of thin, cold air greeted him as he stepped out onto the surface of the moon. His paws sank slightly into the dust, leaving small round prints behind him as he took his first steps. The world was silent, vast, and breathtakingly beautiful. He looked around, eyes wide with wonder. The landscape stretched out in every direction, barren and still, bathed in the soft glow of Mouseldorf 86 hanging in the sky above. He felt like he was in a dream, each step surreal as he moved through the silence, the weight of his journey settling in. With a small smile, Miguel reached into his suit and pulled out a tiny flag he'd made from a scrap of a cloth. He planted it in the ground. "Are you really doing this?" one mouse asked nervously. He planted it in the ground, pressing it down firmly into the dust. "For all the mice with big dreams," he murmured, his words lost in the emptiness of space. Miguel spent the next few hours exploring and marveling at the craters and the strange rock formations that dotted the moon's surface. He bounced lightly with each step, feeling the thrill of the low gravity lifting him with every movement. It was exhilarating, the freedom and the weightlessness making him feel as if he were floating in the world of his own. Eventually, he did return to the Cheese Chaser, exhaustion beginning to set in. He climbed back into the cockpit, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction as he looked out over the moon's surface one last time. He had followed his dream and he made it to the moon of Mouseldorf 86. Well, let's make this a little bit more immersive. You guys can hear the story from Miguel's perspective. "As I settled into the cockpit, looking out over the barren beauty of Mouseldorf 86's moon, I knew my adventure was only beginning. I checked my instruments, making sure everything was in order before taking off home. My mission wasn't just about touching down and returning returning. No, I wanted to bring a piece of this moon back home. I wanted to show the other mice that dreams could be achieved, that there was more out there than cozy little corners in the village. Before leaving, I grabbed a small container I'd brought along the way for samples. Stepping back out one last time, I scooped a bit of the moon's silvery dust and sealed it tight. This was proof of my journey, proof of what was possible. A shiver of excitement ran through me as I imagined my friends' reactions when they saw it. After a final look around, I strapped myself back into the cheese chaser, double-checking my coordinates for the journey back. Taking a deep breath, I hit the ignition. The hum of the engines filled the air as soon as I was lifting off, watching the moon surface shrink beneath me as I ascended. Mouseldorf 86's glowing orb faded into the background as I traveled further, leaving behind that place that had been the focus of my dreams for so long. The journey back was quiet, a peaceful calm settling over me as I floated amongst the stars. I drifted past familiar constellations, their faint light guiding me home. My mind wandered to the future, already plotting new adventures. What other planets were out there? What other mysteries lay in the darkest reaches of space? As I neared home, the familiar blue and green of our world appeared in the distance, a comforting sight after the stark, empty beauty of the moon. It wasn't long before the cheese chaser began its descent, the comforting hum of the ship's engine signaling that I was almost home. The thought of touching down and sharing my experience filled me with a new kind of excitement. A small crowd had gathered around the site as I emerged from the ship. They erupted into cheers and excited squeaks. Friends, neighbors, and a few mice I didn't even recognize were there. Their eyes were wide with awe and disbelief. "You really did it," someone shouted, their voice a mix of astonishment and pride. I grinned, holding up the container of dust. "I did it, and I brought back a little piece to prove it." The crowd pressed their noses in, each mouse eager to catch a glimpse of the silvery dust from the moon. I could now see the wonder in their eyes, the spark of curiosity that I had felt myself for so many years. They peppered me with questions. What was the moon like? How did it feel to be in outer space? I answered them as best as I could, sharing every detail, every strange sight and feeling. It was as if I were reliving the adventure all over again. As the night wore on, the crowd slowly dispersed, leaving me with a few close friends and family. One of them was a mouse named Tilly, who had always been a bit skeptical of my dreams, but she looked at me with a newfound respect. "Miguel, I have to admit, I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. I thought this was just another one of your wild ideas." I chuckled, shrugging. It was wild, but I've always believed if you're gonna dream, you might as well dream big. Sometimes it pays off, you never know." Tilly nodded, a small smile on her face. "Well, I'm glad you did. You've given us all something to believe in here, Miguel." As the last of my friends headed home, I looked up at the sky at Mouseldorf 86 and its moon shining faintly in the distance. A warmth spread through me, a mix of pride and contentment. I had followed my dream, defied expectations, and now I had the memories and proof to show for it. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to normal in the village, though things felt a little bit different now. Word of my journey spread, and soon, mice from nearby villages were visiting the famous dust. Sometimes I'd catch mice staring up at the night sky with wonder in their eyes as they looked at the stars, dreaming of what lay beyond. I wonder sometimes if they were looking at Mouseldorf 86. One evening as I sat by the window of my little burrow staring out at the stars, I felt a familiar itch, the itch for adventure, for discovery. I knew there was more out there, more places to explore, more planets to visit, more moons to visit. The moon of Mouseldorf 86 had been my first journey, but I had a feeling this wouldn't be my last. I began drawing up new plans for a new ship, one that could travel further and withstand more. I'd already learned so much from my journey, and I was eager to apply that knowledge to my next adventure. The possibilities felt endless, each star a new potential destination, each planet a mystery waiting to be uncovered. So do you guys mess with Moon Miguel?